Today we're going to be covering the wearable Dalek casing, and basically I want this to be a drop from Daleks in the future. I don't know how to do custom drops yet though. So to use it, we just put it in our offhand, and we look like a Dalek. So you can see the item kind of sticks out of the side right there, but as you can see we have basically all the features of the Dalek. It doesn't turn with us, which maybe would have been nice, but I'm thinking about just flat out removing that, even just for the normal Dalek. The player itself is invisible, and then we have kind of the falling blocks of a Dalek around us. So we do have a couple of abilities in this form, so if we go into our inventory, we can see we have a bunch of effects. They're kind of being a bit glitchy, but we have stuff like water breathing, resistance, fire resistance, and then we have slow falling as well. So yeah, you have all those effects, and they just kind of make you a bit stronger when you're in the Dalek casing. And then probably the biggest and most overpowered ability is actually has to do with the slow falling effect. So I'm going to go into third person so you can see this a little better. But if you look up while wearing the casing, look at that, you're actually flying upwards. And I'm just going to look down briefly so you can see. We're flying upwards, and you can see there's even some particles coming out of the bottom. And if you look down, it actually will utilize that slow falling effect to make you fall slowly and not take any damage. But yeah, if you're off the ground, you'll get that particle underneath, and obviously that applies, like I said, when you're flying. And like I said, you just fly with looking upward. So how does this all work? Well, if we come in here, it looks like a lot of command blocks, but what it's doing isn't really all that complex. So let's start here. Effect give at A, MBT, inventory, ID, firework star in the offhand slot, which is -106B, with the custom display name of Dalek casing, and its effect giving that player invisibility for 1 second with a 0 amplifier, and then true means it's hiding the particles. And that just means if I hold this in my offhand, I'll get the invisibility effect, but we also want it to summon the casing around us, so I did this, and this is just executing if entity at A with that same data with the casing in their offhand. Then it'll activate this comparator and this repeater. It'll go into all of these command blocks here. So we start here, and these are basically just executing at that player and then summoning the falling blocks around them. And basically these are just copied and pasted from the Dalek's commands. So this one I'd imagine is, yep, the torches. This is probably the other torch, yep. And just make sure they're on time 599 and drop item 0. And no gravity, and that'll just make it to where they appear for the right amount of time, especially if you're in 1.18.2 you want to do these, and they don't drop any items over time. And no gravity just means they won't jitter. Obviously, we've covered that one before, I believe. But yeah, you just do this for all your Dalek pieces, like the end rods, more end rods, the dragon egg, and the obsidian. So let's cover the status effects real quick. Effect give that same player holding the Dalek casing, slow falling, 1-1. Fire resistance I put as 1-2. Water breathing and resistance. This and this and this have to do with the flying effect. So basically, just for the particles, which is probably the simplest part, I did execute at E tag equals fly Dalek. We'll get to what that is in a moment. And then at that entity we did run execute at A, sort equals nearest limit equals 1, meaning the nearest player, and probably what I could have just done is at P, but I overcomplicated it, but it's fine. Basically works the same. If the block underneath that player is air, it's going to run particle Minecraft sneeze, and that's just for, I believe, the panda when it sneezes, but it gives that neat little greenish particle effect. It'll run it at their coordinates, and then this is just how far out it goes. It's kind of a delta. So I just did .3, 0, and .3. 0 is for the Y, so it's not really going to change on the Y-axis, and then Speed is 0, so they're not really doing any moving. Count is 5, and then force means whether it's forced on for people who have their particles off. And basically that's just on at all times, so that when the Fly Dalek entity is summoned, and I'll show you again what that is here in a moment. So that is right here, and this is another falling block that is being summoned, except it's a little different in that it is summoning a block 4 blocks above us, and it's actually a red banner, and that's because banners don't actually show up. They do summon as falling blocks, but they're actually invisible when they do. They don't render properly. So I figured that worked as kind of a invisible entity that we could tie with this TARDIS. And then that just has these same tags, but then has an additional tag here, which you just add tags and then some brackets, and within it you put Fly Dalek. And that's just so that this red banner falling block can be distinguished from other ones in a command that can target it. For example, like I said, that particle was summoning, executing at the entity with tag Fly Dalek, meaning that red banner falling block. So now we have that banner, and when that banner is active, it will put particles under you when there's not a block underneath you. But that's all well and good, but that doesn't really mean much of anything to us. But this does. So we have effect give at that same player, Minecraft slow falling, 1-1 true. And that just means, obviously, they're going to fall slower, and obviously that would be a good time for that particle to show up. But the big deal you're probably thinking of is, how do we do the actual flying portion of it, where you look up and it brings you up? Well, that's the true purpose of the invisible banner. And basically we just have execute as that player holding the Dalek casing item in their offhand, add at S, anchored at their eyes, facing entity at E, tag equals Fly Dalek, eyes anchored feet, positioned, rotated as, positioned. So basically, I think that what this means is that they're actually like facing each other. If that entity at S is within a distance of less than 1.04 blocks, basically. So this, if you haven't already figured out, this is the same command basically that we use for the Weeping Angel. And it's basically just affecting if the entity of the player is looking at the invisible red banner, and if so, it will run effect give at S levitation 1-0 true. So basically, just to run that down, it's executing at the entity holding the Dalek casing, and then it's just detecting if they're looking at the red banner, which is obviously above them, so you have to look upward, and if so, it'll give you that levitation effect. And obviously once the levitation runs out, then this will kick in, so if you stop looking up and look kind of forward or down, then you'll get this slow falling, or you had it the whole time, but it'll actually kick in, obviously, because at that point you're falling, and you'll fall slowly to the ground. Alright, so to demonstrate one last time, put it in our offhand, and now we have the casing. Obviously we have those effects as I mentioned, and we're invisible. And of course, if we look up, it'll detect with that Weeping Angel command, and then once we get one block above the ground, it will begin doing the particles. And of course, if we step off this, the slow falling will kick in, and we'll start slowly going to the ground. So yeah, that's kind of all there is to it with this Dalek casing. Obviously, you could use this for more things, not just a Dalek casing. You can do really whatever you want. One thing that I think would be kind of cool is do like a Davros chair, which would probably just be an obsidian block just to match the Davros we've already made. But yeah, I've been Tbo2. Be sure to subscribe, to follow my Instagram, Tbo2it, to follow my Twitter, which is also Tbo2it, to join my Discord, and lastly, to have a nice day. Goodbye.